especially when you're trying to figure out what's really going on in the world.
Right.
Well, that's exactly why we do the deep dive. Someone out there is curious about something, so we take that, we find the sources, we try to make sense of it all, cut through the noise,
So basically, we're doing the digging, the hard work, so you don't have to.
Yeah.
Hopefully it all comes together nicely for you.
And today's deep dive, well, this one came straight from one of our listeners. They heard this guy, James Corbett. He runs the Corbett Report, and he was on this show, the Jimmy Dore Show. Our listener was really interested in what Corbett had to say about how power works in the world, global stuff.
Yeah, Corbett, he's been doing some really interesting reporting for a long time.
Yeah, since like 2007.
2007, yeah. He goes deep on the things you don't hear about much, geopolitics, how central banking really works, all kinds of stuff.
Even eugenics.
Oh yeah, he's got a new book out actually, Reportage.
That's the one. So what we want to do today, based on what our listener was asking about, is really try to unpack one of Corbett's big ideas. This whole thing about a gang of greedy globalists pulling the strings behind the scenes. We'll be looking at what he said on that Jimmy Dore show. Got the transcript right here. So, first things first, what is this gang of greedy globalists all about?
Well, right off the bat, Corbett says humanity's in this fight, right? A struggle against a group he calls, get this, greedy globalists, egocentric eugenicists, and power-mad plutocrats. And what really jumps out is how he focuses on those egocentric eugenicists.
It's like right out of a history book, isn't it? He goes way back to the late 1800s England, the upper crust.
Lords and ladies.
These gentlemen scientists is what he calls them.
Gotcha.
They came up with this belief that they were just, better than everyone else, like they were born to rule, like they wanted some kind of like scientific reason for why they were on top.
Like they deserved it, yeah.
Exactly. And Corbett points out that back when Francis Galton, the guy who came up with the term eugenics,
Right.
back then the science of genetics was just getting started.
Brand new.
So these ideas they had weren't exactly, rock solid science.
Not like today.
More like a way for the people already in power to explain why they should stay there.
We're the best, so we're in charge. Makes sense to them.
Right, and Corbett makes it clear this wasn't just some fringe theory. Like, he mentions Teddy Roosevelt, big name.
Yeah, Mr. President.
He was all about eugenics, and this thinking, it actually led to laws, like sterilization laws, not just in England, but here in America too, with support from some heavy hitters, like the Rockefellers.
Wow. So this idea of a genetically superior elite, it really took hold.
It did, and this is where it gets really interesting because, you start to see how the wealthy and educated folks, they started to believe that their success, their status, it was all in their genes.
They're born winners.
Exactly. Corbett even brings up this family, the Darwin-Galton-Wedgwood family.
Mouthful.
They were all about marrying within the family, cousins and stuff. Their thinking was that if you get all the smart people together, they're going to have even smarter kids.
A self-fulfilling prophecy, kind of.
Right, but here's the funny thing. Corbett points out that even Darwin himself, like the father of evolution, he was worried about this whole inbreeding thing.
Really?
Yeah, his family had a history of marrying cousins, and he was actually concerned about, what would happen. He even suggested that the British Parliament should track the effects of inbreeding.
So even the guy who's like the poster child for this whole idea, he had some second thoughts.
Yeah, he saw the potential problems, and it's kind of ironic, right? Because the eugenicists, they were all about creating these superhumans, but they didn't always consider the downsides of inbreeding.
Like historically, it hasn't gone so well.
Not really, no. Think about the Spanish Habsburgs. They were notorious for inbreeding, and it led to all kinds of health issues.
Yeah, not exactly a recipe for a super race.
Exactly. And Corbett's point is that even though we don't use the word eugenics so much anymore, this idea that some elites are just inherently superior, well, it hasn't completely gone away.
It's still lurking around.
It is. Now, Corbett, he's not just about pointing out problems. He also offers a solution, something he calls voluntarism.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
And the way he talks about it, it's not some complicated political theory.
Keep it simple.
It's more like, remember those rules you learned in kindergarten?
You don't hit, don't bite.
Don't hit, don't force people to do things, don't steal. He says those basic rules, they should be the foundation for how people interact in society.
So a society based on consent, basically.
Exactly. And of course, the first question everyone asks is, what about the roads?
The classic roadblock.
Right. But Corbett, he has this interesting counter-argument. He says we can have roads and other things we need even without the government forcing us to pay for them.
How's that work?
Through voluntary cooperation, people working together together because they want to, not because they have to.
Okay, that's a different way of looking at it.
It is. The core idea here is consent. In a voluntary society, everything is about agreement. You choose to participate, or you don't.
You're not forced into it.
Right. Which is different from how things are now, where we're often required to do things whether we like it or not.
Pay your taxes, follow the rules.
Exactly. Now, to really understand Corbett's view on power, we have to talk about this framework he uses, the uppists and the downists.
Okay, yeah, I've heard him mention that.
Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So, Corbett, he says this whole left-right thing, the political spectrum, it's kind of a distraction.
Or red herring?
Yeah. He says the real division isn't left versus right, it's up versus down. The uppists, those are the elites, the people in control, and the downists are, well, pretty much everyone else.
Us regular folks.
Exactly. And this up-down thing, it cuts across the usual political lines.
Like, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you're still a downist.
Right. And he quotes this historian, Carol Quigley, who even Bill Clinton mentioned once.
Yeah, interesting connection.
Quigley said that the two big political parties, they should be almost the same so they can stay in control and nothing really changes.
Which is kind of how it feels sometimes, right? Like, no matter who you vote for, things stay pretty much the same.
You get that feeling of, well, what's the point?
Exactly. And Corbett uses this to connect with people who are frustrated with the system. He points out, like, Bernie Sanders or AOC, they're seen as challenging the establishment, but they're still part of it,
So
right?
we play the game.
Yeah. And he even brings up some data, like how more billionaires supported Biden and Harris than Trump.
That's surprising.
It is. And he includes this clip from Fox News where they talk about how the Democrats are relying more and more on rich donors and how some working class people are shifting towards Trump.
But of course, Trump's got his own ties to the elite.
Of course. But Corbett's not trying to endorse any particular politician here.
More like showing a pattern.
Exactly. He's using these examples to show how this left-right thing might be hiding a deeper truth.
Like a smokescreen.
Yeah. He uses this analogy of a bird of prey with two wings, left and right, but they both belong to the same predator.
I like that, very visual.
It is, right. It's like in the Matrix, the system is designed to keep you playing along, even if it doesn't benefit you.
You think you have a choice, but you don't really.
Right. So Corbett's saying politics is presented as this left-right line, but when you add the up-down dimension, you see a different conflict. It's the people who want to control everything versus the people who want power to be more spread out.
Decentralized.
Yeah. And the point is, your neighbor who votes differently, they're not the enemy. The real enemy are the uppists who want all the power.
The ones pulling the strings.
Exactly. And to really illustrate this, Corbett often talks about the Bilderberg.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one for him. What is that exactly?
So it's this group, they meet every year, and it's all very hush-hush.
Secret society vibes.
Kind of, yeah. It's all these super powerful people, CEOs, politicians, bankers, even royalty.
Wow, the real VIPs.
Right, but what's crazy is how little attention they get compared to, like, a big celebrity event.
The media's all over that stuff.
They are, but these meetings, they've been happening in secret since 1954. Only a couple of times they didn't meet because of the pandemic.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is. And they have this rule, the Chatham House rule, which basically means you can talk about what was said, but you can't say who said it.
Extra secrecy.
Yeah. And Corbett sees this as really suspicious, all this power and influence operating behind closed doors.
It makes you wonder what they're talking about.
But exactly, and he links this back to Carol Quigley, that historian we mentioned before. Quigley talked about these round table groups.
Right, the ones who want to control the world's finances.
Yeah, they want to create a world system of financial control in private hands. Basically, they want to run the world.
And Corbett thinks Bilderberg is part of this.
He does. And he points to this bank, the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS.
Where is that?
Basel, Switzerland.
Neutral ground.
Right. And get this, it's a private bank owned by other private central banks.
So it's like the central bank of central banks.
Exactly. A lot of power concentrated in one place. And we even have people admitting that Bilderberg matters, like this guy Willie Clays. He used to be the head of NATO.
Free job.
Yeah. He said that people who go to Bilderberg are expected to actually put the decisions they make there into action.
So it's not just talk.
Nope. And then there's this other guy, Etienne Davignon. He confirmed that they talked about the euro at Bilderberg way before it was created.
So they're planning for the long term.
They are, and Corbett argues that the European Union itself, it's a big step towards this global system they're trying to build.
The EU.
Yeah. He says says they talked about creating a common European market way back in 1955 at the second Bilderberg meeting.
Wow, so this has been in the works for a long time.
It has, and he also talks about how the EU is kind of undemocratic. Like, remember the European Constitution?
Vaguely.
Well, they rebranded it as the Lisbon Treaty so they could avoid having referendums in a lot of countries. Sneaky.
Yeah, except in Ireland, they had to have a referendum, and the people voted no.
What happened then?
Well, they had another vote later, and it passed.
So much for the will of the people.
Right. And Corbett, he brings up this idea that regional governments, like the EU, are like building blocks for a bigger global system.
Like in 1984 with Eurasia and all that.
Exactly. And he even mentions the idea of a North American Union that people were talking about a while back. But the point is, these ideas keep coming back.
It's like they're always pushing for more centralization.
They are. And in his book, Corbett specifically says that the EU becoming this powerful force, it was a win for the elites.
Page 40.
Page 40. He says it wasn't really about helping the people of Europe. It was about consolidating power.
Okay, so it's all pretty doom and gloom so far. Is there any hope?
There is. There is. Corbett believes that more and more people are waking up to how this game works.
Because of the internet, independent media, all that. Exactly. He says if enough people realize they're downists in an uppist system, things could change.
People power.
Right. But he also makes a distinction between what he calls hopium.
What's that?
It's like fake hope, the kind of hope that makes you wait for someone else to fix things.
Like a politician coming to save the day.
Yeah. He says real hope comes from people taking action themselves, empowering themselves.
So we have to do it ourselves.
We do, and he makes this really interesting point. He says the uppists, they're actually afraid of the people uniting.
That's their weakness.
It is. He talks about movements like the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street, how they had all this energy, this potential.
But then they kind of fizzled out.
They did, and Corbett thinks it's because they got divided, distracted by identity politics and stuff.
So we need to stay focused on the real issue, the up-down dynamic.
Exactly. And he talks about how individuals can start taking back power by supporting local businesses, cooperating with each other.
Building things from the ground up.
Exactly, and he mentions 9/11 as an example of something that woke a lot of people up.
And they start questioning things.
Yeah. He talks about the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7, all the unanswered questions.
It's a rabbit hole for sure.
It is. And then he brings up all this weird stuff about the stock market before 9/11.
Like insider trading.
Yeah, there were studies showing that some people seemed to know what was going to happen.
How's that possible?
Well, he mentions this guy, Wirt D. Walker III. He was business partners with Marvin Bush, George W. Bush's brother.
Whoa, small world.
Right. And their company provided security at airports.
Interesting connection.
It is. And there were investigations by the FBI and the SEC into suspicious trades, especially focusing on the Walkers.
What did they find?
Well, the official conclusion was that there was no connection between the people they investigated and Al-Qaeda.
So they just dismissed it.
Pretty much. But Corbett points out that the SEC actually destroyed their records from the investigation.
That's not suspicious at all.
Right. So a lot of unanswered questions there.
Definitely.
So after this deep dive into James Corbett's world, what do you think is the biggest thing for our listener to take away?
Well, I think it's this whole up-down thing. It really makes you look at the world differently, seeing how power actually works. And it makes you realize that division among the downists, it just helps the uppists stay in control.
It's like they want us fighting each other so we don't notice what they're doing.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if this left-right thing, maybe it's just a way to keep us distracted from the real issues.
A way to control the conversation.
Right. And it makes you think, like, where else does this up-down dynamic exist? Not just in politics, but in the media, the economy, even our own communities.
Who's really making the decisions? Who benefits from the way things are?
Big questions.
They are. And if you're interested in learning more about all this, Corbett's new book, Reportage, is a great place to start.
Yeah, lots of good stuff in there.
You can find it at reportagebook.com. Definitely worth checking out.
expert. Always happy to be here to dive deep, right?
That's the idea. And today we're looking at some things that might seem, at first glance, totally unrelated.
Like apples and oranges?
Yeah, exactly. We've got this whole thing with tax refunds, migrants, New York City, and then boom, the shutdown of USA.
Two very different worlds, you'd think. But we're going to see if they're connected by something deeper, something about how we all kind of fit into these big systems, you know what I mean?
Right. The individual versus the machine. And, there's definitely a kind of an existential vibe to all of this.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, where do we stand when these huge things are shifting around us? Okay, but let's start with this whole scene at the Roosevelt Hotel.
The Roosevelt, right. So this is all from a YouTube video we filmed, and it's about this journalist, Savannah Hernandez. She's at the Roosevelt, and she sees this employee from, Jackson Hewitt, the tax place.
And he's not just, like, hanging out. He's handing out flyers to migrants.
Exactly. And these flyers, they're pretty eye-catching. They say, working or not, file your taxes, and we can get the maximum refund for your family.
Wow, that's pretty direct.
It is. And they even put the numbers on there, like over $7,000 with one kid, over $14,000 with up to 3.
So it's like they're really targeting this specific group, these families who are probably in a very precarious situation.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even weirder. The journalist, Savannah, she gets handed a flyer, but then they, take it back from her. And then, get this, a migrant actually gives her another copy.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Like, they're almost afraid to be seen,
Right. And there's even this whole exchange caught on camera where they ask the Jackson Hewitt guy about it. And at first he says something like, yeah, we do this at all the shelters to help people, get them refunds. But then he backtracks, says maybe the company wouldn't be happy about it.
So it's all very hush-hush. And the people in the YouTube video, they jump on this. They say it proves that undocumented immigrants, they do pay taxes. But then they say it's even worse because they're getting these huge refunds even without working.
Which, okay, that raises a lot of questions. Like, how does that even work? Are there certain tax credits that anyone can claim regardless of their work status?
Right, like refundable tax credits. Those are designed to help low-income families. Maybe that's what they're talking about.
Maybe. But then the YouTube video goes on to suggest that maybe, just maybe, Jackson Hewitt's exploiting some kind of loophole, charging a ton of fees to help migrants get these refunds.
Which, if that's true, that's pretty messed up. You've got these people who are already vulnerable, and then someone's taking advantage of them.
Yeah, it's not a good look. It's like this perfect storm of individual need meeting this system that's really hard to understand. And then suddenly we shift gears. In the same YouTube video, they start talking about USA shutting down.
USA Day. Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, a major government organization just gone. And even the people in the video, they're like, wait, what does this mean?
It's like 1 minute you're thinking about taxes and migrants, and then bam, you're in this whole other world of global aid and international politics.
And of course, people start speculating, is it because of the budget? Is it connected to Daily Wire and their money troubles? But honestly, based on this video alone, there's no way to tell.
Right, it's just speculation.
Yeah.
But there is this clip they show of a USAID employee saying, hey, don't worry, we all got paid. So at least in the short term, there's no immediate panic for the people working there.
Yeah. But the bigger question is, what happens next? And the YouTube video suggests that the real financial impact, like maybe tax cuts or whatever, that might take months to show up. Maybe even until the midterms.
So it's like this slow burn. Things are happening behind the scenes, but we won't see the full picture for a while.
Oh, exactly. And then there's this whole discussion about, government spending. One of the guys in the video, he's like, I'd rather see the debt go down than get another Doge check. But then he also says he doesn't trust the government to spend money wisely.
Which, let's be honest, a lot of people feel.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, cut taxes, but also don't waste my money on things I don't agree with.
It's that classic dilemma, right? And it makes you wonder if some people support these shutdowns, not because they'll see a direct benefit, but because they think it'll force the government to be more efficient, more responsible in the long run.
So it's like they're playing the long game, sacrificing now for a better future.
Maybe. Okay, so we've got these two seemingly separate things happening, but now let's put them together. Let's think about them in a more, existential way.
Yeah. Like, what does it all mean for us as individuals, caught in the middle of these giant systems?
Right. So you've got the migrants, they're trying to make their way in a new country, and they're interacting with this incredibly complex tax system. Maybe they understand it, maybe they don't, but they're trying to get what they need. survive, to build a life.
And then you've got USAI, this massive organization that's supposed to be helping people all over the world. And suddenly, it's gone. Poof. What does that do to the people who rely on it, who work for it? It's like suddenly the ground is shifting beneath their feet.
And it makes you question, doesn't it? Like, how much control do we actually have over our own lives when these huge forces are constantly at play? Are we just pawns in a bigger game?
Right. Or are there ways to navigate these systems to find opportunities, even when things feel chaotic and uncertain? Like those migrants, maybe they're actually figuring out how to work the system to their advantage.
Maybe. But the YouTube video doesn't give us any easy answers. It just shows us these different perspectives, these different interpretations of what's happening. And that in itself is kind of an existential lesson, right?
Absolutely. It's like we're all trying to make sense of this world, but there's no one right answer. It's all about how you see it, how you interpret the information you have.
And sometimes the more you look, the more questions you have. Like, what will the long-term effects of the USA shutdown really be? Is what Jackson Hewitt doing ethical, even if it's legal? And how do we, as individuals, find our footing in a world where everything seems so unpredictable, so in flux?
So, to sum it up, for you listening out there, we've looked at this situation with migrants and tax refunds, and then this whole thing with USA shutting down, and we've seen how these events are being interpreted to different sides of the story.
But more than that, we've tried to go deeper. To think about what these events tell us about the individual, about our place in these huge systems that we often take for granted.
And we've left you with some big questions to ponder. Questions about agency, about control, about how to make sense of a world that's constantly changing.
Because ultimately, that's what this deep dive is all about. It's about helping you find your own answers, your own meaning in the midst of all the chaos.
And who knows, maybe by looking at the world this way, by embracing the uncertainty, we can actually find a way to make things a little bit better.
Maybe, just maybe.